A Chicago ballpark ran a promotion tied to disco records. Bring one, get in cheap. Simple enough, except more than 50,000 people showed up for a promotion built for a fraction of that, with thousands more still climbing the fences when the gates finally gave out. Between games of a doubleheader, somebody lit a crate of vinyl on fire in center field, and what happened next stopped being a promotion. It was bonfires, foul poles, torn up grass, and a major league game cancelled by riot. Everyone agrees a DJ blew up some records that night. Nobody agrees on what exactly that crowd was actually burning. Officially, this was about music nobody wanted anymore, except the man holding the detonator wasn't some neutral disco critic. He had a grudge, and it started 7 months earlier, on Christmas Eve, when he opened his mail and discovered he no longer had a job. WDAI, the rock station where he'd worked, switched formats, and according to Dahl's account, it happened without warning, replacing him with the very genre he'd spent years mocking. His name was Steve Dahl, and the station hadn't just laid him off. It had replaced him with the exact genre he'd spent his career mocking on air, on the one day of the year built for good news. He didn't take it well. He took it personally. The station wasn't chasing a fad. It was chasing the safest bet in the industry. According to music industry accounts, the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack had transformed disco from underground phenomenon into mainstream juggernaut. One movie soundtrack had turned a genre into an industry certainty. A band in matching white suits topping the charts again and again. Firing the rock guy wasn't reckless, it was math, and Steve Dahl just happened to be the remainder. A DJ with a grudge and a rival station both smelled the same opportunity because rock listeners weren't dead, just furious and looking for a leader. So WLUP hired Dahl and handed him a microphone and, effectively, an army. He twisted WDAI's slogan into something crueler, gave his listeners a name, the insane Coho Lips, and gave them a chant simple enough for a stadium to scream in unison. 2 words: disco sucks. Sounded like a joke, a cheap radio bit, nothing worth worrying about. It did not stay that way. Before Comiskey Park, the growing anti-disco movement had already begun testing its muscle at radio stations and smaller venues across Chicago. That should have been a quiet win for Dahl's crowd. The anti-disco fervor was building momentum. Police had already been called to contain crowds at other venues where the format wars were heating up. A DJ's chant had turned into a mob with an address, and Comiskey Park was still a month away. The White Sox front office watched all this and saw an opportunity, not a warning. Promotions director Mike Veek and WLUP's Gary Meyer pitched a doubleheader stunt built around Dahl's audience. Management ran the numbers on a losing season that was drawing maybe 9,000 fans a night and figured this novelty might add a modest bump on top of that. Comiskey Park was about to learn what an army actually looks like when it shows up. 20,000 was the plan. Reality showed up in a different mood entirely. Fans scaling outfield walls for free, security overwhelmed at every gate. The stadium filled well past capacity, with tens of thousands more stuck outside, chanting through the fences. Roughly 40,000 more never got past the turnstiles at all, which meant the gates themselves became the first riot, hours before anyone struck a match in center field. Dahl himself was shocked by the response. Years later, he acknowledged the crowd far exceeded anything he had anticipated for the promotion. He was off by a lot. The plan was simple: collect the records at the gate, load them into one crate, blow it up clean. Reality had other ideas. The sheer volume of people made crowd control impossible. Records intended for a controlled demolition were instead brought directly into the stands. As the explosion erupted in center field, records were already flying through the air, creating a chaotic scene that security couldn't contain. The crate he detonated was just the leftovers. Dahl figured the crowd would cheer, maybe rush the crater once, then wander back to their seats for the second game. Instead, the explosion worked like a starting gun. The crowd rushed the field in chaos, with thousands breaching the barriers and creating dangerous conditions that forced the game to be abandoned. One witness put it plainly: they cared more about circling those fires than watching baseball. Team management and broadcasters attempted to restore order, urging the crowd back to their seats as the situation spiraled out of control. Nobody moved an inch. The field itself gave the verdict first. Grass torn to dirt, bases missing, a crater where center field used to be. There was no version of Game 2 happening on that surface. American League President Lee MacPhail didn't even need to inspect it twice. He ordered the second game forfeited to Detroit, on the record books forever as the last forfeit the American League has ever seen. According to accounts from Tigers management, the chaos on the field was treated as a forfeitable offense, not a natural disaster beyond anyone's control. The final tally left a stadium in ruins and a night that would define baseball's most notorious promotion. The riot got a nickname almost overnight. The night disco died. Tidy, almost funny, easy to repeat. Except disco didn't start that summer in a Chicago outfield. It started a decade earlier, in New York clubs, where Black, Latin, and gay dancers built the sound from nothing, long before anyone thought to burn it. Ask the men who actually covered that scene, and the story stops being about music at all. Music critics of the era documented how disco's origins in Black, Latin, and gay communities were central to its cultural identity, even as the sound crossed over to mainstream audiences. Dave Marsh went further, pointing straight at the double standard underneath the whole backlash. White audiences dancing gets called a phenomenon. Black audiences dancing gets called Tuesday. Disco, he argued, was never meant to sit still and be judged like a rock album. It was built for the floor, not the turntable at home. Dahl has consistently described the event as a promotional stunt, though critics argue this framing overlooked the cultural undercurrents beneath the spectacle. He's kept telling it that way for decades, a baseball fan who never once told anyone to jump a fence. According to cultural historians, the language around disco's rise in the press often carried coded meanings that extended beyond music industry concerns. A joke needs a punchline. This one just needed a target. The chart, meanwhile, had already turned. By summer 1979, the Bee Gees' dominance on the charts was already beginning to fade as radio formats and listener tastes started shifting away from disco's peak. Nobody torched a stage for that one. Radio just quietly stopped calling. The way a phone stops ringing after the breakup nobody announced. Comiskey didn't start the funeral. It just supplied the fireworks. The funeral, in fact, had already been budgeted for. Industry observers noted a growing disconnect between how heavily stations played disco and how many records fans were actually purchasing. By 1979, multiple factors were converging: oversaturation of disco product, listener fatigue at radio, and rising competition from emerging genres like new wave and punk. The industry wasn't collapsing under a bonfire. It was collapsing under its own spreadsheet. Dahl has maintained in recent years that the event was about baseball and music promotion, not about inciting the crowd to riot. The field he wrecked is a parking lot now, but the question that crate was supposed to answer, whether that crowd was burning bad music or burning the people who made it, never got a verdict. It just got a nickname instead. Somewhere in that same decade, a different genre was about to get its own trial by fire. That one had guitars.